My name is Gerry Peet, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to our sanctuary. Even though this is just an experiment, it feels really wonderful. And let's hope that in the not too distant future, at least some of us can come here on Sundays. So we're changing things up just a bit today in the order and in the content. But I, as many of you know, have been a member of this congregation, I guess, for about 12 years. And I've had the honor of standing before you at this pulpit, or virtually anyway, and otherwise many times. When I have to lead a worship service, I try to satisfy two criteria for myself. The first one is, do I have a message that comes from my heart? And two, can I take that jumble of thoughts, feelings, ideas, facts, and different things that I learn about and shape them into something that might be worthwhile hearing? It's hard to do. It's especially hard to do now. Since last I was in the pulpit, which was in April, the world seems like it's changed 180 degrees and then changed 180 degrees again. So it's hard to know how to give voice to what you really want to say. But at least for today, I have come up with a couple of other voices that I'm going to share with you today. The first one is the Reverend William Barber, and the second one is the Reverend Dr. Cornel West. And at least for me, their Baptist approach so powerfully resonates with me. It's like music in my soul, and our music will take the same flavor, and my many thanks to Kathy Williams for doing that. So you're going to hear both of these folks speaking to us. They're speaking to us as Unitarian Universalists at our very own General Assembly. Dr. West in 2015, and that's going to be about 9 minutes. And then Reverend Barber in 2016 for about 3 minutes. Now, a lot has changed since then. So please listen closely to their words, and you may recall them because we've used them previously. I ask you to consider anew their inspiration and how they might move you to live differently in this world today. Move you to be a part of achieving a world we so often talk about in this very congregation. So walk with me, take my hand, let's together build a better land. And I would like to dedicate this service to the memory of John Lewis. He was a giant among us.
21 years ago, when a hate-crazed anti-government militia member detonated a bomb and killed 168 people, including children and infants in Oklahoma City. Hate went into a rage, but those parents didn't call for us to go find every militia member and kill them because they knew that hate only leads to more hate. Hate wants us to react in this moment. Hate wants us to be cynical in this moment. But we must remember that down through the years, and I question sometimes the media that says this is the worst. Well, we got to be careful about this. It's bad. My God, it's bad. But we need to understand that in our past, people have faced worse, and they still did not give in to the evil side of humanity. They suffered, but they refused to respond to hate with hate, and they believed that faith and love and nonviolence was still greater than hate. And so, as I conclude, we cannot in this moment, my Unitarian friends, fall into hate's trap. We cannot become cynical. We cannot go hide behind our walls of quarantine. No. We cannot lose our faith and hope and love and justice. We cannot give into the politics of hate. And we surely cannot do this. We cannot allow those who have stirred hate, let me just say this quietly, y'all didn't hear it, Mr. Trump. We cannot allow those who have stirred up hate to now offer themselves to be the savior from hate. Instead, those of us who have in our history the commonality of suffering from hate, But we also know from history that ultimately those who have won the day are those who chose love in the midst of hate, those who chose not to let hate define their lives, those who rose from the crucifixion of hate to the resurrection of love, truth, and justice. My brothers and sisters, this is the time that we must choose whether we will lash out with fear and division and petulance and hate, or whether we will embrace love more boldly and walk in truth and justice. I declare to you today, the time is now for us to join those who lived before us, who in the face of hate chose community, chose love, chose nonviolence, chose the way of justice. Let us say, on our watch, we will speak up, we will stand up, we will come together, and we will make sure that love, justice, and equality and nonviolence has the first, the last, and the loudest word. We will do it, and together, we shall overcome.
Let us be clear that we begin with a critical self-inventory. Who are we, and what kind of human beings will we choose to be in our short move from our mama's womb to tomb? That's the fundamental question. And what I love about the Ware lecture is that Henry Ware Sr. and Henry Ware Jr. was wrestling with that fundamental question of what does it mean to be human? We know Henry Ware Jr. was the mentor to the greatest man of letters ever produced in the history of this country. His name was Ralph Waldo Emerson. Give it up for Brother Ralph. Give it up for Brother Ralph. He may have left tradition of Unitarianism in the 19th century, but it never left him. It's like being a Catholic. Even when you're a lapsed Catholic like James Joyce, you still a Catholic. It leaves that UU mark on ya. I want to begin with an epigram from the greatest of all public intellectuals in the history of the United States. And I'm not talking about the great John Dewey, though he's a grand candidate. I'm not talking about Edmund Wilson, though he is also another candidate. I'm not talking about Susan Sontag. Oh, how magnificent she was in her essays. But I'm talking about W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois. And in 1957, at the age of 89 years old, he decides to write love letters to the younger generation. It's almost as if he knew that there would be another wave of marvelous new moral and spiritual militancy among a younger generation who are hungry and thirsty, something beyond the superficial culture of spectacle. W.E.B. Du Bois, 6 years. He's emerged from a court, handcuffs, working with the Peace Information Center, charged by the U.S. government of working for the Soviet Union. They found no evidence, but at 83 years, he is already living roughly under house arrest at 31 Grace Court in Brooklyn Heights, in the greatest borough in the world, Brooklyn. And he has one major visitor once a week. He's living under house arrest in Philadelphia. In 1939, he was the most popular Negro in the whole world, and now he's under house arrest. His name was Paul Robeson. And Du Bois told Paul Robeson, somehow we've got to prepare the younger generation to be spiritually fortified intellectually sophisticated, morally fearful, but also humble. So he embarks on the writing of 3 novels. Can you imagine at 89 years old, you embark on the writing of 3 novels? The first novel was called The Ordeal of Man's Art. You turn to page 275 in that first novel. And he says, I've been wrestling with 4 questions all of my life, and every generation has to come to terms with these questions. On the writing of 3 novels. On the writing of 3 novels. First novel was called The Ordeal of Man's Art.
Sorry again, we'll have it with sound on this time.
Intellectually sophisticated, morally fearful, but also humble. So he embarks on the writing of 3 novels. Can you imagine at 89 years old, you embark on the writing of 3 novels? The first novel was called The Ordeal of Man's Art. You turn to page 275 in that first novel. And he says, I've been wrestling with 4 questions all of my life, and every generation has to come to terms with these questions. The first question, how shall integrity face oppression? How shall integrity face oppression? Oh, for me, that's one of the most fundamental challenges of our day, because we live in an age of mendacity. It's an age in which lies are ubiquitous. Not just in the business community, even though when you turn the business page, you see scandal after scandal after scandal. There used to be a labor page, but that's gone. Oh, that's a sign of the weakness of the organized working class, isn't it? But it's true among our young people. 58% say they cheat regularly on exams because it's a question of just getting over being obsessed with the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. Oh, of course, even in our churches. My church, Shiloh Baptist Church, we had pastors. Now more and more we got CEOs running the churches, the market model setting in. Mega churches, but not a lot of mega courage. Mega churches, not a lot of mega love. Mega churches, not a lot of mega justice. Mega churches, huge building fund, but very weak prison ministry. Mega churches, prosperity gospel, chamber of commerce religion. Mendacity ubiquitous, and the younger generation hungry, thirsty for integrity. Now by integrity I don't mean purity. Each and every one of us not free a spot or wrinkle. each and every one of us, fallible, finite, no one of us having a monopoly on truth, capital T. But at the same time, integrity has to do with what is the quality of your courage and your willingness to bear witness radically against the grain, even if you have to sacrifice something precious, including your popularity, in the name of integrity. That's what Du Bois was talking about. And let us be very clear that to be fundamentally committed to integrity makes you countercultural in an age of mendacity. You have to cut so radically against the grain. Intellectual integrity, the quest for unarmed truth, and we know the condition of truth is always to allow suffering to speak. And if you don't allow those who are suffering to raise their voices and play a role in the shaping of all of our destinies, you can be assured that mendacity is operating in a powerful manner. Thank God for the Supreme Court that I had begun to think didn't have the capacity to speak for. Thank God the voices of our precious gay brothers and lesbian sisters and bisexuals and trans peoples can now be heard in the sense of having their dignity and humanity affirmed to love in whatever form they want to love. That is worth celebrating. That's worth celebrating, y'all. Even in this dark moment with all of the thickness of evil, that's worth celebrating.
Amen. It is such a gift to be able to be here and listen to Kathy in person. It is truly wonderful. Thank you, Kathy. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Do not become bitter or hostile. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. We will find a way to make a way out of no way. And those are the words of John Lewis. These are the words of Kenny Wiley, I guess a former Unitarian Universalist religious educator, from a sermon he gave in 2015 entitled, "Which Side Are You On?" In 1965, Dr. King asked, "Who killed James Reeb?" Reeb was a young Unitarian minister from Boston who answered to the call to go to Selma. Dr. King said, "A few sick and misguided men." Indeed. For being white, supporting black folks' freedom struggle, Reeb was viciously and fatally attacked. Dr. King kept going, though, asking, what killed James Reeb? The blame is wide, the responsibility grows. He was murdered by the irrelevancy of a church that will stand amid social evil and serve as a taillight rather than a headlight, an echo rather than a voice. So in his death, James Reeb says something to each of us, black and white alike. Says that we must substitute courage for caution. Says to us that we must be concerned not merely about who murdered him, but about the system, the philosophy which produced the murder. And I give my thanks to Jane Podell, who brought this wonderful sermon by Kenny to our attention. Where does this leave us? You heard the voices of some pretty powerful people. Where are we as Unitarian Universalists? In a moment that feels like there's change in the air, but be certain this moment won't last. Moments have come before, moments in my lifetime and in the lifetime of older folks, when we thought change was coming, but it didn't. In fact, just as President Trump likes to do, we were doubled down on, and the situation that we had seemed better for what was has become the present. It's very, very sad. But again, I just want to shift the conversation a little bit to Unitarian Universalism and where's our role? Where's our role religiously? And the following words that I'm going to say, I've wanted to say in church for 35 years. They're by Bob Dylan. God said to Abraham, kill me a son. Abe say, man, you must be putting me on. God say, nope. Abe say, what? God said, Abe, you can do what you want. But next time you see me coming, you better run. And there you have the foundation of monotheism. You can yada yada a while into the future, and you can come to Christianity. Christianity had a rocky start, but it really got going once it was determined that you didn't need to be Jewish to be a Christian. Once you didn't need to be Jewish to be a Christian, it was okay to blame the Jews, elevate the religion to a religion of death and not a religion of life, and on we go to another 1,000 or so years. In about 1883, and you may need to look this up because I don't know if the date is right, there was this group called the Western Unitarian Conference. And they were worried that Unitarians were shrinking, their influence diminishing in the East and the West from where it had been a scant 50 years before. Well, somebody thought, maybe you don't need to be Christian to be Unitarian. It's an idea. But Unitarians were definitely Christians. Make no mistake. In fact, Brother Ralph left Unitarianism because he thought it was too Christian. Now, what did that do? Well, what that did was, it kind of gave us what we are today. You can sort of be what you want. You can be UU hyphen, UU Wiccan, UU Jew, UU Protestant, whatever you want to be. It's considered okay. Now, that's all right for individual people, but it's not all right if you're going to stand up for something as a group. We, as a group, have resisted standing up for things with exception. Obviously, we were a big part and big supporters of the civil rights movement, of women's reproductive rights, of marriage equality, of gender unity, or whatever it is we're calling the movement now, that lets everybody have a voice. But do we have a leader? We don't. We don't have anyone who speaks for us because we wouldn't allow anybody to speak for us. It's a big thing in congregations. Ministers have lost their jobs over thinking they had that right. They don't unless we give it to them. And as any of you who were here when Reverend Sarah was being called and joked, ah, ha, ha, we'll vote 50-50. That's our history. It's rare that we come together. It's rare that we come together as a denomination. But our president, Susan Frederick Gray, is trying to get us to come together. I urge you to follow her on Twitter or Facebook. This minister is out there. She's using language of reverence and yet the language of equality and love to bring our message to a wider group. The question is, what do we do? What do we do right here? How do we become part of this moment? And again, this moment might not last unless people work very, very hard. The world is in, I guess it's in worse shape than I thought, because the more people that write about and talk about how we have to change things, it's as though they never noticed they were bad. I was talking to somebody the other day who's a Unitarian Universalist, and he said incredulously, "You mean you tear down monuments?" I said, if they offended me, I would. I said, I don't need a monument to George Washington. George Washington was a slaveholder. George Washington wouldn't free his slaves because of how much they were worth. Thomas Jefferson wouldn't free Sally Hemings and her descendants because the money was too much. Alexander Hamilton knew the only way for a country to survive was to be richer than everybody else. He set us on a course where for a while that happened. Riches let you do what you want. And that's basically what we've done. We've denied rights to more and more people. It's more obvious now than it was. But we didn't raise up people like John Lewis and many, many others, and people like Dr. King, because of how fair this country was. How can we sit here in 2020 and remember that Rodney King was nearly beaten to death 20 years ago? Nobody went to jail. And how much has changed? How much has changed? Again, it's my feeling, and this is just my personal feeling, that if we were somehow to achieve the goals of Black Lives Matter, our society would be so transformed, we wouldn't have to worry about doing the other stuff because it would be done for us through that effort. The idea that we could have the words, all men and women are created equal, actually means something, would solve a lot of problems. You don't have to worry so much about who gets into college because of racism if there's no more racism. If educational opportunities were equalized, you wouldn't really need to worry about that. You wouldn't need to worry about people in rich enclaves trying to keep people out because their property value would go down, bringing their school taxes up, having their kids not be educated enough to get into the schools that most of us can't afford to go to anyway. But again, just my opinion. I didn't really want to say too much because how much could I possibly add to what you've already heard? But again, you have to think about what's important in your life. More important, what would you give up to get it? Would you give up your air conditioning to save the planet? I'm not sure that I would. I hope I don't have to make the choice. But again, our Unitarian Universalist denomination has a role to play here if we will take it. I think we have leadership now that we've not had before, and this may be our moment to become relevant on the national stage. Thank you. We affirm that love is our greatest purpose. Accepting one another is the truest form of faithful living. The search for truth is our constant star. We pledge our hearts, minds, and hands to challenge injustice with courage, to find hope in times of fear, and to live out our Unitarian Universalist values every day as a beloved community. This do we covenant with each other and with all that is sacred in life. Please join us in singing our closing hymn, number 1017, Building a New Way.